We're live. Awesome. Hello, everybody. Welcome to another edition of the Cream City Cast. I'm Dylan Piccolo, once again joined by Andrew Goodman. And this is CreamCityCentrals.com's weekly podcast discussing the latest in Milwaukee Bucks takes and giving you the latest going on in Milwaukee. Our podcast is brought to you by the Shepherd Express in Milwaukee. You can check out their publication at shepherdexpress.com. And this isn't just a regular edition of Cream City Cast. We're joined today by ESPN Milwaukee's Eric Nehm. And Eric covers the Milwaukee Bucks over at ESPN Milwaukee, and it's pretty good with having all the latest stuff going on with the Bucks, and we're very enthused to have you. So, Eric, thanks for coming on.
Thank you so much for having me.
Awesome. Yeah, Eric, thanks again, man. Another up and down week for the Milwaukee Bucks. You know, we've come way too accustomed to this season. And it all started with a win at Phoenix, 113-107 in overtime, in Eric Bledsoe's revenge game against the Phoenix Suns. Remind you, there was no Antetokounmpo resting his sore knee. Eric Bledsoe finished with 30 points. The Bucks also got a big 40-point effort from Chris Middleton. And DeAndre Liggins in 41 minutes, although he only scored 2 points, he played excellent defense on Devin Booker. He finished with 5 steals, 2 blocks, and 6 rebounds. The Bucks followed up that win with a horrible performance at Utah, and this was actually their 16th straight loss in Salt Lake City. And we just saw a horrible team effort from the Milwaukee Bucks, from their pick-and-roll defense, just a straight-up man-to-man defense. There was just no communication at all, leading to the Jazz to make 18 three-pointers, which was their franchise record. And this is actually the third time this season an opponent has broke their three-point made record in a game. The Milwaukee Bucks then followed it up with a win at Sacramento yesterday, 112-87, and Milwaukee looked great from the beginning, and they ran the Kings out of the gym. Giannis finished with 32 points, 5 rebounds, 4 assists, 5 steals, and a plus 26. He also rested most of the fourth quarter, which is great news for the Bucks. Haven't had the luxury to do that this season. Bledsoe was far too much for Kings rookie De'Aaron Fox to handle, finishing with 21 points, 5 rebounds, 5 assists, 3 steals, and he was a plus 27. The Bucks defense looked great, holding Sacramento to 40% shooting, and they also forced 16 turnovers. It looked like Milwaukee was running a little bit different of a defense. They were still aggressive, but not overly aggressive like they have been this season, and they were very aggressive in the passing lane. So, Eric, did you see anything yesterday that really caught your eye in their adjustments?
Yeah, I mean, it was different, which is not something you can really ever say for what the Bucks have done in the last couple of years. It's always been that same over-aggressive, early help, over-help kind of system, and that wasn't the case last night. So that was surprising, to say the least. It was interesting to kind of see them try something new. It's something that they've done throughout this year. Most notably, I think the largest number of people noticed it during the third quarter of the Utah Jazz game. That's when they came out and started doing some more switching, playing a little bit less aggressive in the help kind of lanes, and just kind of allowing their defense to play a little bit more. So that was kind of a nice thing, because against the Jazz, they did it. And then after 3 minutes of it working, they decided, let's go back to what we've been doing. And, well, you just mentioned how that Jazz game went. So it didn't go well, and it was refreshing to see a whole game of something new.
Yeah, I definitely agree with you. So that being said, with how up and down Milwaukee has played this season, where are you standing with Jason Kidd and his effectiveness as head coach? You know, we're in year 4, and the Bucks, still struggling, with mediocrity, inconsistency.
I mean, I think there's, to some extent, you're going to be a young team, and young teams are going to struggle with consistency. But at the same time, you have one of the 5 best players in the league, and you don't really have excuses anymore. If this is a put up or shut up year, and when you look at this team, they've been meh offensively and meh defensively. So you need to do better than average when you have that type of player, that type of talent. And now, especially after the Eric Bledsoe deal, there's not really any excuses for this team to be bad offensively or defensively. And that's what they've been since Bledsoe has been here. They've been bad offensively, 21st in offensive rating since Bledsoe got here. Defensively, they're doing a little bit better. That was buoyed by some good performances to start the Eric Bledsoe tenure. But now that they're sitting at 9th defensively, I mean, I think you have to expect either on the season that this is a top 10 offense or a top 10 defense. And you have to do one of those things well. Otherwise, I just think it's a total failure as a coaching staff.
No, and you're right. There really is the Eric Bledsoe effect, and they did start off remarkably, and everyone's expectations, I think, kind of were like, oh man, they're going to be absolutely amazing and they're going to go on a 20-game winning streak. And it didn't really go like that. And I think that, I think yesterday, actually switching to that defensive scenario that we were talking about, it kind of helped. We were playing against the worst offensive team in the NBA, and it was kind of nice, actually. I think that was the first 20-point win we've had since last year against Phoenix. So it was nice, and especially because of Giannis with his knee, I think that resting him was important. But I think you really did see the highest potential of what our defense can be yesterday, especially with the turnovers. In the second quarter, I mean, I've never seen a defensive performance from our Bucks team like that.
Yeah, and the big thing was it was not kind of how they tend to get turnovers. Normally it's okay, it's going to be a hard trap here on a pick and roll. You're going to get your hands on it, go the other way. They were in the passing lanes. And if you can get steals in the passing lane, then you're really on the break. And you saw a lot of that with Bledsoe, with Giannis really getting out there and running the break. That was exciting basketball. It was easy basketball. So I think that would kind of be the hope. But if there's been kind of one trademark of the Jason Kidd era, it has been a stubbornness to change. Offensively, things have remained pretty much the same. Defensively, they've remained the same. And obviously at that first year, the defense was great, but the NBA's changed since then, and the defense has not changed along with it. So oh man, I'm trying to think of the best way to sum it up. I guess I'm probably cautiously optimistic that this will be the defense that they continue to run going forward. But again, this is the Jason Kidd Milwaukee Bucks team that has not changed. So this would be a huge deviation from what they've done. And frankly, I'd probably be surprised if they stick to it. But at the same time, if you're looking for a team to get better, you're looking for your team to essentially save your job, that would kind of be the kind of change you would need to make.
Well, don't you think that this defense is playing more to the Bucks' strengths necessarily? Because they're so long. The trapping, it's really hit or miss. And like Jason Kidd said in his after the post game against the Jazz, they're not a quick team. Why do I see this defense and I see the length that they have, and it kind of shocks me that they haven't tried this before, because they are so long and they are kind of relatively flat-footed when it comes to on the defense side of the ball.
Yeah, I mean, I think there's two ways that you can kind of deploy that length. And one was the very aggressive and the overhelping and trying to overload and essentially create a wall where other teams are just like, oh my gosh, I have the basketball, what should I do? And we saw that manifest itself against the Raptors, and it was awesome in the playoffs. The Raptors kind of played right into their hands. But if you're able to be a little bit more balanced, to stay under control, you're going to pick it apart with passes, and you're going to be able to get over the top of it. So that was one way. This other way, where you're switching a bunch of different positions, you're very aggressive in the passing lanes. I know Danny LaRue was talking today about how so often last night the Kings were throwing passes that you would think would get through, but this Bucks team is so long that a pass that would normally get through that passing lane, they got to. Exactly. So I think you can kind of see. You could definitely see the thought process behind doing that original defense, but you can now see that it doesn't work, and maybe changing it would be the way to go.
Yeah, because Milwaukee is definitely at their best when they're wreaking havoc in the passing lane, getting out and running, getting easy buckets, because we all know their inefficiencies with their half-court offense. It's pretty hard to watch at times, to say the least. You have like three guys posting up on the same side, and it's just bad basketball. But, yeah, go ahead.
So we were having a debate, me and a couple other people, and it was about Giannis. And I personally think Giannis needs to become more of a playmaker, sort of like LeBron does in the pick and roll scenario when he's going downhill. And I understand we don't necessarily have the shooters as good as Cleveland around him. But do you think that it would be better for us to try to have Giannis try to become more of a playmaker? Or do you think it would be better for him to try and maybe develop some more post games and kind of give him the ball down there? Or don't you think that you'd rather have the ball in his hands?
This is the really tough thing with Giannis. I've never seen anyone score like him, ever. Like I've mentioned this on other podcasts. I've mentioned this on our podcast on Locked On Bucks. He's averaging close to 20 points per game in the paint. The last guy to do that was prime Shaq Like Shaq in 99, 2000, 2001. That's how many points he gets in the paint. And he does it efficiently. Like there's no problems with him when he gets the ball in close. And he's just kind of a cheat code because he's dribbling into those looks. Like there's not a post up. So the tough part with Giannis is he's become such an efficient, ruthless scorer that asking him to play make, well, okay, he can pass out of it, but he can also just score. So I do think some of the playmaking has to be on other people when now it looks like Giannis's game, at least at this point, not that maybe someday once he becomes a better passer, once he can see those looks a little bit better, maybe then he becomes more of that playmaker. But right now, him being a 30-point scorer a game, like that's really helpful. And if he does it super efficiently, that's nice.
Yeah, absolutely. And, you know, with how up and down the Bucks have been, we saw frustration start to boil over a bit in that Utah game, especially with Giannis Antetokounmpo. That's the most vocal we've seen him in his career in Milwaukee, wouldn't you say?
Yeah, I was trying to think of other times. Tackling Michael Dunleavy certainly comes to mind.
Yeah.
I don't know if he said anything when he tackled him, but that was certainly quite demonstrative. I mean, it's something he's been working on. He's been trying to become more vocal, but yeah, I don't think we've seen another incident like him and Sweeney on the sidelines.
And that segues into the question, who's going to be the guy for the Milwaukee Bucks to rally the troops, you know, when the going gets tough? And who's going to be that guy to step up in the locker room? Chris Middleton, John Henson, perhaps? Because in years past, you know, they had Jared Dudley, who was great in the locker room, but this year they don't seem to really have a quote-unquote vet.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's really hard with this team because – you look at the two guys that should serve that role are Middleton and Antetokounmpo. Both those guys were notoriously quiet at the start of their careers. They're both quiet guys. They're both more reserved guys. And for Giannis, it's a second language. Like he's still trying to learn English in American culture. So yeah, it's going to be difficult for him to communicate and serve as that vocal leader. Middleton is just a quiet guy. So it's both of those guys. They just have to continue to figure out how to do it. And then also they have to figure out how to bring it consistently every night. Because with Giannis having such a heavy workload offensively, defensively, he hasn't, I mean, the numbers are still good defensively, but he hasn't been quite the same defensively. And already this year with Middleton, we heard him say, he told me in the locker room the one night that I reported that he said he just felt like he's been lazy this year. And there's been times where he hasn't been working hard enough. And well, it's pretty hard to be a leader in rally the troops when, well, you're not listening to the things you're asking out of other people.
Yeah. And, you know, the Bucks have the Jet, which is great, but you're going to need your young studs to really step up in the locker room and make a difference.
You got to be on the floor. Like there's only, and this is what I always tell people when they ask about, oh, maybe Jet should have came back as an assistant coach this year. Like, yeah, maybe he should have, but there's a difference between being on the sideline and saying something to someone and then literally being on the floor. And if you need to, pull some guy's jersey and say, okay, this is where you should be, or talk to him in between plays. Like those are things that can't be done from the bench. You need to be on the floor to do it. So yeah, it's got to be one of your studs and one of your guys that's on the floor for 35 minutes tonight. So Middleton and Giannis have to figure out exactly who it's going to be between the two of them and how they're going to step up and get that done.
And I agree with you for sure, because it's like you look at the game, for example, like against Dallas, Utah, and then maybe even that game against Charlotte. In Charlotte, it's, you know, the great players will their teams to victory. And I understand Giannis is 22, so we have to give him some time. But, you know, with the team being so like good as skill-wise, you'd think like maybe they would be this year. But he's 22. He's a year older than me, so I don't think I would. I don't think I would be could be willing those guys on the court like that. But I'm also not 7 foot and Greek, so
sure. At some point, you do have to have expectations. Like you can't just always bounce back on, oh, he's young. Well, okay, that's fine, but he's got to play, and he's got to make that happen.
Absolutely. Now, I want gut feeling, yes or no. You can explain it after. So, if the Bucks do not win a playoff series this season, is Kid gone?
Yeah. I would say, I guess, so I've had this conversation with Matt Velasquez before, and we've tried to make it that simple, but there's obvious extenuating circumstances. So right. For example, say you are the 4 seed and win 48 games, and or say you're the 5 seed and you win 48 games or 47 games or whatever it may be. You clearly improved by 4 to 5 games from the year before, but you still end up falling to the Wizards or the Raptors or something in the first round. You could probably attempt to talk yourself into, oh, the Bucks made a step forward this year and that's good enough. But I just don't think I peppered these guys with questions throughout the start of the season, before the season. What are expectations? And again, I heard 50 wins and I heard win a playoff series. I think if you fall short, that's the thing about expectations. There needs to be accountability. Expectations should always equal accountability. And if that's not happening, then why are you even putting out expectations or thinking that you should be a team that should contend in the first place? So if you actually believed those things that you told us, and again, I know people will say, well, during the preseason, teams are always positive. They're always thinking, I agree. Teams are positive during those times, but not to 50 wins positive and not to playoff series wins positive. You use cliches, you use creative ways to get out of actually making a prediction, out of actually making expectations and say, oh, we're going to have a good year. You find a way to do that rather than saying 50 wins and win a playoff series. So if you don't get those things, I just don't see how you can stick around.
And if that were to happen, do you see any realistic replacements around there floating out?
Oh, I'm terrible at that game. I have no idea. There's so many times where we've seen assistants come from within different organizations that you like. Like, I don't know, Messina's a popular one where he'd be a guy like that. Becky Hammond, like you're trying to think of organization. Essentially the game that you play is you're trying to think of organizations that you like, and then you're trying to look in their organizational depth chart for a coach that you think could be on the rise. Like, essentially, I think that's how most people go about thinking of their dream coach, the next coach, whoever may be. I'm not very good at that game. Like, if I'm being totally honest, like I'm sure there's a ton of really qualified people out there, but I don't know. I don't know those people. I'm not going to get to interview those people. I'm not going to understand what those people actually think. So I will pass on that one just because I have no idea.
The thing is, though, is I think Jason Kidd is the right coach, but I just think that he's so thick-skulled almost that he won't
He's
change.
stubborn.
He is. And, you do want, I think, like having a point guard as a coach, and especially maybe one of the top 10 to ever do it, is a great thing, and especially for the team that we have. But it's just like, I just don't know if it's just there all the time. And, there's been some reports like, oh, is he like all there, and is he really like committed and everything like that? And I think he is. I just think that maybe it's just like this team. They just got to start pulling out these games where they just look like they're sleepwalking into it. And I know that Kid's accountable for that. It rests with the head coach. But, I think the players can do a lot to it as well, just kind of how we talked about accountability before.
For sure. People really hate when Jason Kidd says something about energy and effort.
Oh God.
People despise it. But at the same time, like there's definitely schematic problems, and obviously I've written about them, I've talked about them for years now. But at the same time, the scheme's gonna the scheme might be bad, but the scheme only gets worse if you don't try. If you don't give that energy and effort. So like, I understand why that upsets people. And I know they feel that there's a lack of accountability from Kidd for drawing up the scheme, but at the same time, like, players do have to play. And that is a real thing in the NBA, that if you're not going to bring it, well, you're going to pay for it because these are professional basketball players. So it's funny that you bring that up, because I do think there is some aspect of bringing it every night, and the Bucks have struggled with it thus far. So they kind of have to see what they're all about. But I don't know if Kidd is the right guy. The thing I always wonder about with really great basketball players is sometimes I just feel like their genius is not transferable. That they can see it really well. And I always tell Frank this quote, but I remember I was watching a documentary on Isaiah Thomas, or maybe it was about the Pistons, but Isaiah Thomas was talking about how when he had the ball in his hands, he 100% knew that, okay, if I dribble right, all 9 guys on the floor are going to move in a certain direction. And if I dribble back left, they're going to move in that direction. And when I'm doing those things, I'm controlling all of the chess pieces. I have all the control. I know exactly where everyone's going to go, so that if I want to get a defender to move 2 steps to his right, well, then I'm going to take one dribble, and then I'm going to take a shot fake, and then I can pass it over the top. And I just think it's such an innate skill that I really struggled to understand if guys can pass that on. Like, I don't know. Kid can definitely do that. He can tell Giannis, okay, so you're going to take 2 dribbles to the right, and then you're going to shot fake, and then you're going to see the opening over on the left wing. But you can just tell him that. You can't be in his mind and actually make that happen. And I think that is one thing I'm just really curious about with Jason Kidd is if that lack of I don't want to say it's a lack of control. It's just a lack of insane control, a lack of physically being in guys' heads.
Yeah,
like
it's not 2K.
It gets to him. Like you don't actually get to control the guys. You can tell them, but you don't get that actual control. So that's always something I've wondered with him.
Yeah.
Yeah, it is different, being a player, you have all the court vision right in front of you and, it's sitting on the bench, you can't, it's totally different dynamic, like you said. But switching gears over to some fan questions that they had for you. They want to know, are you concerned with Malcolm Brogdon's production since Eric Bledsoe came in?
Yeah, I'm going to shamelessly plug my own work. I just wrote something about that at ESPN Milwaukee about the struggles of Middleton and Brogdon since Bledsoe has been in town. So, yeah, I'm very concerned about it. I think those two are struggling to kind of find the ways in which they need to be effective, the ways that they can affect the game, because they just got used to playing a certain way, and that way was fine. And the Bucks offense was successful when they did that. But now you add Eric Bledsoe in, and I think it's both on the players and the coaching staff. I don't think the coaching staff has done a great job specifically tailoring opportunities for those guys. Middleton's a great shooter. So is Brogdon. They haven't found ways to get them involved in that type of, with those type of looks. And instead it's just been, okay, you're going to get the same looks that you always get, but you're not going to get as many of them, and you're going to have to make something happen in those moments where you do get those looks. And I think both Middleton and Brogdon have struggled with that. So I think it's a huge concern. Overall, the biggest problem with this team right now is not the starting lineup. Like, the starting lineup has been totally fine, whether it's been Henson for Maker, whether it's been Bledsoe for Brogdon. The starting lineup has been fine this entire season. It is the moment the starting lineup gets broken up, whether it's just 2 of them, 1 of them, no matter what, as soon as the starting lineup is out, they start to struggle. So it's figuring out how those 4 main playmakers in Giannis, Bledsoe, Middleton, Brogdon can have an effect on bench units. And that doesn't mean the bench needs to score. The bench can continue not scoring. It doesn't matter who scores. Those lineups just need to be more effective.
Yeah, and that kind of segues into the next part of the question is, Matthew Dellavedova went down with that, what was it, knee tendonitis, I believe, something like that, some perhaps maybe phantom knee injury. But do you see a place for him on this roster when he returns?
I mean, with the ineffectiveness of the bench in general, yes, it's going to be totally necessary. And I know Liggins has done some nice things, but Liggins is an interesting guy in that he can be so positive defensively, but offensively, if he's not catching and shooting, you don't want him to touch the ball. So you have to find a way to juice up those bench units, and maybe Delly taking some of Liggins' minutes helps with that, because I know there's been games where Liggins has gotten 30 plus minutes. Like, that shouldn't happen. Like, DeAndre Liggins is fine, he's a great role player, but that's just so detrimental to your offense. You're just not going to be able to find successful offensive units with that. So when Delly comes back, hopefully you can at least split some of Liggins' minutes and get Delly out there a little bit, and hopefully juice up some of those bench lineups.
For sure. So the next question, it's kind of switching over to the center. So a couple fans asked about possibly about inquiring about DeAndre Jordan or maybe Jahlil Okafor. Do you think it would be advantageous to go after another center, or do you think you're pleased enough with Don's development to stand pat for this season? I know DeAndre he'll be a free agent after the end of the year, so that really doesn't make a lot of sense. But I guess let's just open it up to centers in general. Would you be open to taking another center on right now, or do you think you're comfortable with what we have?
I kind of joked when the Monroe-Bledsoe trade initially happened. Bucks fans kind of inundated my mentions with, what are they going to do at center? They need more centers. And I was like, how are we in a world where the Bucks had 5 centers last year, and they finally got rid of that problem? They don't have 5 centers anymore, and everyone's like, oh, you might need another center. It's okay, you don't need more centers. You just might want a better center. You might not have enough trust in John Hens. You might not have enough trust in Thon Maker. So I get the idea of trading for a center, but I just think you're just adding so much. You're essentially going to relegate someone to a role that is not helpful for them, whether that's Henson going back to being a guy that can't get off the bench, whether that's Maker going to an even smaller role. Like, I just don't think that's helpful for either of those two guys, though I can understand why you'd want better play out of the center position. I just don't know how much that helps. And I got to say, with Jahlil Okafor, he's super cheap right now. I think you could probably get him for a second-round pick, maybe a late first, which, again, this guy was a high pick, someone that a lot of people really like. But at the same time, the Sixers just don't really want anything to do with him. And now I don't want to say he's causing problems, but there's at least enough of a problem that they're just not willing to play him. And they're just willing to totally tank his value. So in those situations, you do have to wonder if something is up. And also, I just don't know how good Jahlil Okafor is. Like, he might be really good offensively, but at the same time, he's been kind of inefficient offensively, and he hasn't been that impactful offensively. So there might be something there, but I just don't see it.
And I think we have bigger needs than a center, honestly. And I know we talked about the inefficiencies on the bench. I mean, you could use another guard or a wing, to be honest with you. And I think that ranks a little bit higher than a center, in my opinion.
Especially in the modern NBA.
Yeah.
You can survive with two workman-like centers and Henson and Maker if you have a little bit more production in some other places.
Absolutely.
Right, because the NBA is totally shifted away from, Greg Monroe type game, back to the basket, old school style play.
I just want some center Giannis, man. Like, give me like 10 minutes of that every night and I'm happy.
Oh, man.
Do you think that small ball's an option when Jabari comes back? You think that we'll see that more?
I almost think you have to, just because the tough part with Giannis and Jabari is essentially they're both fours. Like,
right.
No matter what positions you want to say they both play, like, they're both fours. So you do have to find a way, and that means shifting someone up or shifting someone down. I would prefer shifting Giannis up for 10 minutes a game than shifting Jabari down for 10 minutes a game.
I totally agree.
Yeah, I think the Bucks would be really successful in the small ball lineup when Jabari returns. But looking at the Bucks' current net rating of negative 0.6, do you think their play this season resembles a team that will finish under 500 when the season's over? Because I also saw, I forgot where it was, but their point differential is that of a team with 50 losses. And I thought that was very, very, very concerning, to say the least.
Yeah, I think last night their point differential added 6 wins just because they got a blowout win for the first time in a while, which is nice. But still, I think that made them like a 36-win team on the season according to point differential. So not great, not where they need to be. And I mean, I think a lot of the numbers right now would suggest that this is a team that finishes under 500. Now, do I think their talent reflects that? Do I think all the things that they can do reflect that? No, I don't. But the way that they're playing right now, the bad defense, the offense just cratering since Bledsoe came. Yeah, those are two really concerning things. And those are two ways that you will not win a lot of basketball games. So, though I think a lot more of this team's talent and the things that they can do to say that they look like a team that should be under 500, everything they're doing at this moment would suggest that they will be a team under 500. So they have major problems to fix, and we'll see if they can do that the rest of the year.
Yeah, luckily we're still pretty early in the year, so this is a time where you want to fix those before it goes on and season progresses.
Yeah.
Yeah, thanks, Eric. That was Eric Nehm from ESPN Milwaukee. You can follow him on Twitter at Eric_Nehm, Nehm. You can check out his articles at ESPN Milwaukee. And once again, thanks for joining, Eric.
Yeah, it was a real pleasure having you, Eric. Thank you.
No problem, guys. Thanks for having me.
All right, so that was Eric Nehm, and we're going to segue to the Shepherd Express Minute, and Andrew will take care of you there.
Yeah, so on Wednesday, December 6th at 7:30 p.m. at The Rave, teen R&B star Khalid will be performing alongside Jesse Reyes, so make sure you get tickets to that.
Awesome. Yeah, like we said, Shepherd Express is our sponsor for the show. You can check out our podcasts on there. You can also check out cool things like Khalid's performance, new food, all that cool stuff going on in Milwaukee. So that's shepherdexpress.com. You can check them out there. And then, Andrew, did you want to just tell everyone the games coming up for the rest of the week?
Yeah, so tomorrow the Bucks are back in action at Portland. They take on the Blazers tomorrow night. Should be another good test for the Bucks with two of the best guards in the NBA and CJ McCollum and Damian Lillard. Let's see if the Bucks continue to roll out that strong defense that they played against Sacramento. And then the Bucks have a rematch with the Kings on Saturday night in Milwaukee. So hopefully we can chalk that up as another easy dub.
Yeah, I think that's if we keep playing how we did against the Kings, understand we're getting a little step up against the Blazers here, but I think we can go 2-0 in this stretch and hopefully get back on control. But that's it for this episode of Cream City Cast. You can hit me up on Twitter at DylanPiccolo35. You can hit Andrew up at Andrew_Goodman3. Once again, we'd like to thank Eric Nehm from ESPN Milwaukee for joining us. Like I said before, you can hit him up at Eric_Nehm, Nehm. And it was a really great episode, and we hope you all enjoy it. So thank you, and go Bucks.